right there, but that's why I'm the dumbass. What is cracking, ladies and gentlemen, as we observe this November 22nd, year of our Lord 2020, 57th anniversary of, you can't even, the public execution of our 35th president, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, in downtown Dallas. And I'm so stoked to be joined by, people very dear to my heart, man. Burmis, we just came off of an incredible weekend of commentating fights for Caged Aggression MMA, but we're going to have to switch lanes here. But you killed it, my friend. You've clearly been on the mic before. You clearly interviewed a person or two, but it was we did very well, man. It was very cool, and it was awesome to have you on the team and getting your insight, etc. That's we're gonna be doing some cool shit here in the future, here in March, for Caged Aggression MMA. But today, again, we are observing the 57th anniversary of the death of President Kennedy. I know you've already been doing stuff today and dropping it like it's hot on several different channels, and I know you are a big brain on this subject. I want to also bring in Justin Holstein. I mean, his background is quite lengthy and quite extensive. He's one of our production partners on all the stuff we do, whether it's Everything Combat, the Conspiracy Farm, everything. And he was one of the co-producers of our pay-per-view this weekend. But he also happens to have an affinity for the assassination of JFK. And that is, even though we've seen a lot of documentaries, a lot of things going on about this subject, we are working on something that's really extra special as it relates to this subject. Justin, how are you doing, my friend?
Very good. Very good. Yeah, it was.
I'm glad you are here. Yeah, go ahead.
I hate to just out of interest. I'm maybe I've already heard this story, but I'm trying to remember what everybody's affinity for the JFK situation, death, assassination, how it came about.
You stole my thunder, dude, because that's what I was going to kind of ask each of you guys. Like, how did it? Where was it? What was the bug that bit you as it relates to? I mean, I'd be more than happy to talk about mine, but I've said it many times. Burmis, where did it start with you as far as it relates to the Kennedy assassination?
Well, I guess that depends on what you mean. Do you mean when did I start questioning whether my government was actually involved and it wasn't Lee Harvey Oswald alone?
Yeah.
I think that especially in our age group, I guess I'm the youngest guy here, but I'm still 41 years old. When was it really popularized and when would you start to care? Well, honestly, I was just turning a teenager, and that's when you had that first big Hollywood push. And what do teenagers like? They like movies. So JFK was kind of this cultural phenomenon that most people point to where they're like, maybe something was there. And, it was on the cover of magazines. People were looking into it. And quite frankly, up until then, I wasn't really that interested. As a kid, I was into dinosaurs. UFO stuff was actually, really embedded in my brain from the time I was like 8 or 9 on. I was studying that kind of stuff. But the JFK stuff hadn't come about. Now, when it did, I just didn't give it too much thought. Maybe it's the indoctrination of being a kid. But for me, I was kind of like, rah, rah, America. We were just starting to get over the Russians. They were starting to get their own freedom. Gorbachev was coming together. We weren't doing weird drills anymore. And MTV was telling me we're going to rock the vote with Boris Yeltsin. So at the end of the day, as I started, going to college, I just thought to myself, yeah, they killed that guy. You can't trust the government. But at the same time, he probably deserved it. He was probably doing some fucked up shit, man. I love America.
Burmis.
I'm just telling you how I thought. I
love it.
This today, kind of with the guys where we really ran deep. And the thing is that on top of that, it was a little later, when I'm starting to like really get into the UFO stuff, and all of a sudden I'm coming across the human experimentation stuff that's coming out with Clinton and, Tuskegee and the radiation experiments. And then it's MK Ultra. And probably pre 9/11, when I'm reading the MK Ultra stuff, that's when there's a bit of a turn where I'm thinking to myself, well, maybe the government wasn't so benevolent on this. But I still, at least thought there was some kind of involvement. And, I wasn't that concerned. It was really only post 9/11 and my realizations there, Jeff, that, I really said, whoa, okay, now it's game on. Let's take a look at this. And it was in that, I guess, revelation of the real world.
Yeah.
I started diving down that rabbit hole extremely seriously and checking out documentation and what was real and what wasn't. And obviously, at that time, post JFK, it was also, it's that time period when you and we can remember a time where there was 3 or 4 channels and you had to turn a big knob and that was about it, to a time when you had 12 channels and then you had 18. And then you had 26, and now you had 57, and the History Channel was there. Yeah. And even the History Channel, I'm just saying, even the History Channel, back in the days before Ancient Aliens, and it wasn't just World War II, they would play in stints around this time of the anniversary, The Men Who Killed Kennedy. That gave you great access to it. Yeah. A lot of people don't understand because they're in this generation. This is a time before I could get a DVR. It didn't exist. It wasn't until the late 90s when I went to college when a DVR was an offer and there was on-demand stuff. So it was really in that turn, of.
You're making me feel old, bro. God damn.
Well, we are old, brother. I hate to tell you.
You're right. Well, we're older, but no, I feel you. I know.
Listen, man, I've always been able to run my mouth and I've always been able to bullshit, but I like to do so with actual facts and evidence. And I've always had a craving to see what was out there and pit it against. So it is that late 90s, first internet era, just like with my 9/11 research, where I'm getting every single video broadcast I can on that. It wasn't just 9/11, especially with JFK. Now I can get the PDF files of everything that's there. And not only that, I can use OCR scan that I learned in Photoshop because I went for graphic design to actually keyword search this stuff. It seems elementary now, but then it was something different. So again, post 9/11, when you start really, especially, you see my film Invisible Empire, I got a special little section on George H.W. Bush in there, and his possible connections to the Kennedy assassination are astounding. They're astounding. So,
yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, we'll get into it without a doubt.
Yeah, it was that evolution of seeing what the world really was and how some of these power players had come up through historical records, their own actions, videos, news reports, things that I wasn't being taught in mainstream history or told on mainstream CNN or Fox.
But you also had that internal inclination to question it. Some people, that's such a huge thing now to even question official narratives, because now people just consume it and they ask for seconds. Like I said, they're fed sewer rat and been told it's pumpkin pie, and they're like, wow, this is so yummy. Can I get seconds of this? Juice, when did this hit for you, man? And we've talked about the JFK assassination for quite a bit. When did this bug bite you, sir?
Yeah, it totally started at 9/11, only because just from my age, the early part of your life you spend, and I don't even mean this in a conspiratorial way, but indoctrination is a big part of any nation's, educational system, right? And I don't mean it just from a standpoint of national, global, whatever. I just mean there's a certain way your society works and functions, and you have to be taught on how to indoctrinate and work within it, right? So questioning it isn't part of the game, for your whole, until you're born, until a certain age. I think what really hit me is in college, we had decided, this is my partner I'd started True Player Entertainment with way back when, Chad Kalick. We had started this film company and he had moved out to Los Angeles. And, we were taking various trips, shooting music videos and doing a lot of this stuff at the time when the towers came down. And I remember the biggest thing was, it was guttural, what woke me up. I was just walking around and driving down the streets and people had their American flags up all in their houses. And, I go to work and they're talking about, yeah, we know it's some fucking raghead that did this and we need to bomb the whole goddamn area. And I'm just sitting there listening to people going, what is wrong with people? What is going on? Like, nobody has, the ability for practical thought anymore. It's just, just an emotional, I'm mad at someone, point the direction and we will go. And I'm like, well, really? Jesus, no wonder how easy it is to control a nation. I mean, nobody's going to question.
That's why when I was living
anything.
in Chicago and it was happening all over the country, I was living in Chicago and like a bunch of Sikhs were being beaten after 9/11 as if Sikhs were Muslim. But that, like you said, to your point, that's how visceral the desire for revenge and retribution was after 9/11.
Yeah. So we had scheduled to fly out to Los Angeles, and this was 3 days after 9/11. So when the third day came up, they had stopped flights. So it was just coincidentally 3 days later, my flight was booked, and I went to the airport not knowing if I'd actually be able to fly or not. And they made you go like really early. This is the switch of the whole Homeland Security, getting scanned, all the rest of it, right? It started right then. I mean, before then, the whole airport experience was completely different. I mean, they gave you meals on all the planes, just everything was different.
Right.
And I just remember as we're flying out there, I think my connecting flight was through Detroit. And when I got off, it's just quiet and everybody's looking at the TVs, just waiting for some shit to go down, And everybody's looking at anybody who looks different than them or, foreign or whatever, and just giving them looks. And I remember normally I'm pretty talkative on flights. And for this one, just because of what had happened, it was a little bit quieter. So I didn't really talk to the lady next to me flying into Los Angeles. And we got close to landing. And I think the captain came on there and said something like, we're getting close to Los Angeles, blah, blah, blah. And so I started talking to her, and I think she was going back from New York to Los Angeles. I think she was from Los Angeles, something like that. Anyway, so as we land, the plane lands, and the captain comes on and goes, "Ladies and gentlemen, we are in Los Angeles." And like the whole plane broke into like applause. The lady next to me started bawling, and I didn't realize like how many people had been trapped in areas that they couldn't fly anymore, some of them knew people in New York, some of them had. So this like really affected the country. And
of course, yeah.
And it really hit me at the time. And I'm sitting there going, obviously you're extremely interested in figuring out what is at the bottom of all this. And so I think that, and then watching Jason's film, Loose Change too, there was just so many steps to this awakening of realizing that the official stories being told, it's not that all people should just inherently be conspiratorial. It's just that you should understand that it's in human nature for people in controlling, whether it be just a company at a small level or a big level or a government or whatever. There's inherent risk in letting people know too much information because you have to control that flow of information. So it's not that, people go, oh, these weird people that are conspiracy theorists. It's like, well, no, everything is partially conspiracy based just because that's the way human nature works. I mean, it's not so, but I think Kennedy in and of itself was a huge switching point to this because America was still somewhat young at that time. It's not that we didn't have all of our conflicts and lies and false flags even at that point, but it's just that was the blatant that they would say up is down and down is up and believe it, America. And everybody went, okay. And I'm just amazed looking at people going, I'm sorry. No, he didn't get shot from the back of the head. Just watch it. Well, that's just because they were going fast and the wind was blowing his head back. And I'm like, are you insane? Are people lost logical thought? What is happening?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And we were talking about this earlier today. And this is something that, I mean, as someone, this is what the bug bit me when I was like 16, 17, watched a documentary called Reasonable Doubt. One of the main people in that documentary, it was on A&E. This guy's name was Sarah Wecht. He was a forensic pathologist who was on the House Select Committee on Assassinations Forensic Board. I wound up having him on my original show. It's Me Speaking to You. I just posted that on all of our platforms today. Something we talked about today is, in my opinion, in order to understand the who and the why, etc., you have to understand the world that JFK inherited from, I think, after World War II. Your Mockingbird, your beginning of the OSS shifting into the CIA, the NSA, all of that stuff began to blow up. Your John Foster Dulleses and your Allen Dulleses had shops set up in a serious way. So in 1960, even honestly in the Middle East, Gabal Abdel Nasser, his nationalization of the Suez Canal and him trying to make peace with those guys and kind of throwing off this kind of larger hegemony that was kind of going on in Eurasia, if you will. I think we have to understand that world and the apple cart that he was upsetting when he came in 1960. And we can get into his father and, the Cook County votes and how they kind of stole the election, but he did get in there. And as idealistic as they were, they wound up, whether it was geopolitically or from the mafia standpoint, because Bobby Kennedy became the attorney general, started upsetting a huge apple cart of these guys kind of rat lines that we've talked about many times on the show, that they're trading in guns and arms. I don't know how much people and body parts, but I mean, that was a huge, they had that set up for a very long time. So to understand why he was killed, in my opinion, you have to go back into the geopolitical world before he came in, going back to the end of World War II. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
I think you're 100% correct. And I think the credence to that is kind of laid out via Eisenhower, right? Like in the military industrial complex, he talks about on his way out, right? He discusses it.
Not even talk about it. He warned it.
Well, the thing is that, again, Eisenhower's no angel. That's how he gets there. This guy,
of course,
is part of that same war machine that now he sees taking aim against the general populace. And I discussed this in part today too, because I don't know that the guy behind me, Mr. Camelot, is an angel either. I don't believe that. I think that when you get to these levels, I mean, out and out, everybody knows now, if they're honest with themselves and they go into the historical record, that his father, Joe Kennedy, was a legitimate gangster to the point that he was fictionalized in the last 2 seasons of Boardwalk Empire. Talking about being a gangster and a bootlegger and becoming into politics. And, it's not like I'm not trying to be ironic when I say the guy's name is Andrew Capo Cuomo, because he is in a cartel. He is in a crime family. That is how he acts. That is what this is. And they respect power. Sometimes it comes in different forms, but especially there in that real birth of the national security state. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, Jason, what's your explanation for why JFK and Bobby went after the mafia and a lot of those power circles?
I think it was different people. I think they had aligned themselves with certain people that they thought they could go after. I don't think, first of all, the mafia is one entity. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's when we say the mafia traditionally, are like, people have this stereotypical view of some Italian guy in a nice suit or now in a tracksuit, etc. I mean, you're in the show business, that, and that's personified. When, again, one of the things Whitney Webb has done, has shown you, the genesis of the Jewish mafia. The Irish mafia existed at that time as well. The Yakuza exist. There are varying degrees of criminality, and people like Joe Kennedy knew that they could leverage that into politics. If you look, for instance, via the Bush family, they had a different avenue than Mr. Kennedy did. They had that avenue of Yale and Skull and Bones. They had this nice little tire business. But Prescott, the grandfather of George W., he was an ambitious social climber. And in those days, you kind of had to pick your battles. Not everybody's a gangster, right? Some people do it a little more slick. And remember, Skull and Bones are the original intelligence agencies. This is where the genesis of the CIA comes from a guy like Prescott. So I'm not saying that he's not a murderer. He was never proved an actual murderer, but he sure worked with murderers. And that's why Averell Harriman, was seized at one point by J. Edgar Hoover, actually. via them working with Nazis before and post World War II. You know, that there's a lot of intricacies when you're talking about these things, because we see it in our intelligence services. We don't look overseas. We forget there's a whole thing called Project Paperclip, where we brought in these Nazis and they became part of that military industrial complex that was on the rise that Eisenhower warned us about. Remember, Eisenhower was a Bohemian Grover. He was an insider. I think the key to his speech is spiritual. And the bottom line is, none of us are fucking angels. You're not Justin. You're not Jeffrey. I've done bad things. I know I've done bad things. I try to be a good person. And I think at some point, no matter how many mistresses you've had or Hollywood bitches that you've banged, at the end of the day, some of us still have a soul left. and there's just certain points where you've had enough. I mean, let's look at the guy who's in power right now. He's no angel. He's also, I'm not going to excuse everything that he has done, but the guy is literally, as I've said before, lived on fucking hookers and Big Macs his whole fucking life. Okay? And
Hookers and Big Macs. That's a reality show right there.
Yeah, well, listen, and been out for himself and helped build Atlantic City with the mafia openly and is an actor and has lied to people. But when it comes down to the gravy train with biscuit wheels that he brought in for, you know, people like me, by not making it mandated I needed overpriced insurance and getting a fine after the fact. People like me by cutting taxes, even if it was for the wealthy, where I saw that in my check when I was running a bar every week. And I'm like, well, you know what? That's not bad. People like me that said, you know what? I don't like the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and I don't want to be a part of that whole global agenda with an initiative to tax me for carbon credits. You know, there were some wins with the guy. And if people think that I'm on a fucking MAGA train, I am certainly not. I've probably focused more on the negatives than anything else, because that military industrial complex that we talk about has only been fed by this guy, knowingly or not, period.
Well, and that's the thing. We get so caught up in the bread and circus of the Pepsi challenge, right versus left. And there is so much nuance, not just into if they've done something good or bad, but even going back to what we're talking about, there is so much nuance to these things they call conspiracies. Again, you know, going back to the apple cart that he upset Kennedy talking about after the Bay of Pigs, you know, his firing of cats who had been there forever, who had set up shop forever in the intelligence world, Richard Bissell, Alan Dulles, Charles Cabell. And we can't overlook the fact that Earl Cabell was the mayor of Dallas at the time of the Kennedy assassination. So, I mean, none of these things just happen in a vacuum. And it's so obviously frustrating when we start talking about, you know, conspiracies, because people are like, oh, you just can't understand that this lone dipshit with his shitty Italian rifle shot the most powerful man in the world. I mean, it's easy to oversimplify it in that way, but cats like you and I who go deeper, there's just so much more to that.
Well, Jeffrey, all right, yeah, exactly.
Go ahead,
and when someone says that, I go, whoa, buddy, on this whole, you know, I go, first of all, I don't know that Oswald wasn't involved in some way. I know he wasn't some fucking idiot psycho. I know that he had extensive military training, that he had been overseas, that in his 20s, that he had been with 2 separate wives and women, spoke a language so much he brought a Russian wife over, spoke very eloquently.
No, not just been overseas, bro. He fucking defected basically to Russia and came back with a girlfriend. When has that ever happened?
And got a passport after the fact to go again. Okay, so and if you've ever listened to when he was doing Fair Play for Cuba Committee interviews, he's very smart. He's not a dummy. Okay, I'll tell you what I didn't do.
At a very young age too, man.
22.
Exactly, all those things. So I go, wait, I'm not saying the guy might not have been involved. I'm saying he's not some dummy with a rifle with a beef against the president. And, you know, I guess we're going to kind of get into that, but it's really been through interviews. Obviously, you know, I've seen it all, guys. You know, that post 9/11 era, when I'm talking about downloading everything, and we talked about the men who killed Kennedy. I've done it all. I've listened to every Ike lecture you can imagine from the 90s on. How do you think I found Alex Jones and ended up working together? And that's the thing, you know, a lot of people are always going to say, well, you're never going to know the truth. Why does it matter? Or even if you did know the truth, why would it matter? And my argument is this. Of course, the truth matters. It always matters. It is a trick. Okay, it is a deception to think that somehow not knowing the truth is a good thing, so you can remain within your ignorance comfort bubble. That is the largest deception, or that you can't change it. You know, I called MMA fights. Pro MMA fights this weekend, gentlemen. I have looked to that goal for well over a decade. You can ask any of my buddies and friends. I've talked about it forever. It actually came to fruition. People told me that was never going. I mean, who the are you kidding? The conspiracy fucking guy? And before I was the conspiracy guy, I was just a fucking pizza boy. It's the pizza boy, you know. And a lot of people, you know, to this day, they're doing hit pieces on Loose Change, saying that we're the destruction of society. We're the genesis of fake news. We're the ones that caused all of this, when it's inverted and upside down. And my thing is, we've got to keep pushing back. The truth does matter. And if we were able to actually declassify all those documents and expose the deep state for what it was back in the 60s, that might spark enough people to say, what the fuck is going on here?
Well, even again, man, I say this all the time. Everyone just has a fast food kind of nature to how they get news. Similar to our fast food, we go through McDonald's or whatever the fuck. We get a bunch of food, fill our fat fucking bellies. We're satiated, but there's no nutritional value in that shit. Same as now, we watch 30 minutes of or an hour of whatever. We have no fucking clue. They're just feeding us nonsense. And when we sit here and tell you, Operation Mockingbird, this shit's horse shit. You know, it's like, hey, you've been listening to whatever. But when we go back to again to Oswald and understanding who he is, this information is public when you understand who got Oswald's job at the fucking depository. George de Mohrenschildt. Who was fucking George de Mohrenschildt? The guy was roommates with George 41 Bush in college, and Bush's phone number was in his wallet when he was killed before he was about to testify to the House Select Committee on Assassinations. None of this shit is hidden. I would love to have people, you know, declassify shit, but through plausible deniability, all of that shit, you're never going to be able to just tie it up in a nice bow. We have to start looking at this circumstantial prima facie evidence, which just on its face lets you know this was a fucking work. Oswald knew Rubenstein and Ruby. Who the fuck is Ruby? This guy was working for Nixon, investigating shit for Nixon back in the 40s and 50s. Like it's so much more deeper than people realize. But, you know, we're the crazy people when we say, no, there's just something more to this, guys.
Yeah, I think, you know, the hard part is it's almost like what you were saying there, Jason, is it's hard to communicate from our standpoint where we're at now. You know, we're all at maybe various different levels, but fairly in the same camp, that to people just waking up, because you don't remember what you used to think at the young age you were at when you first started understanding maybe that things don't seem what they say they are, right? So if we're already talking 20 years down that pathway, people are looking going, oh my God, these people are crazy. I was presenting to Jeffrey this whole idea of doing a documentary type project on JFK because I was driving somewhere and I'm listening to, God, what was it called? It's Alaska, Lost Over Alaska.
Yeah, about the Alaska senator. It was killed over in a plane crash over, I think it was Alaska, like you said. I forget the name of it exactly.
Yeah. And it was so interesting because it was just like one of those whodunit conspiracy, like interesting. But the way the guy presented it, he didn't say anything other than some evidence and where that may lead. And, you know, he didn't jump any hurdles to just assume anything. And I think it was done in a very good way. But he got to the point where he's talking about who was killed over Alaska and who they lost. And one of the guys, come to find out, was a senator, a Democratic senator at the time, who pushed, I'm trying to think of the guy who started the whole investigation on
not Wade Boggs, Senator Wade.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name.
Something Boggs was his last name. Was I thought Boggs. Anyway, he is the one who privately, supposedly in quiet circles, supposedly met with the guy who started the whole investigation on the Warren Commission. and the legal case brought against I'm horrible with names. I'm trying to pull these people out of my head right now.
Yeah, he got in contact with Jim Garrison.
Yes, Garrison. Supposedly, he was the one when I think Garrison's daughter had said that Boggs had met with him to say, you need to do something. You're in a position as a prosecutor to bring a case. This is going to get lost on the American public and nobody will ever talk about it again if we don't act now. So you have to bring a case. So he convinced him. He made the move. That senator ends up dead and lost. And supposedly they have all this evidence that the mafia was involved in planning a bomb when they took off. So, you know, here we got a guy. And then I listened as I was going through listening to all these private conversations with Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, because we record all these White House calls, right? And one of them was with Richard Nixon. And they're talking like one of the other senators who's a Democratic senator, and Nixon's going, so what's going on with your boy there? And and he's like, oh, you mean Boggs? Yeah. Well, we're talking to him. Yeah, you know, he needs to calm down. And yeah, I don't know if he's losing his marbles there a little bit there or what, but no, I know
it's Hale Boggs.
Hale Boggs. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Hale Boggs. The disappearance of a twin-engine Cessna 310 in Alaska carrying 2 U.S. congressmen captured the headlines. The plane went down in Alaska in October 1972 during a rainstorm, and nearly 5 decades later, the cause of the crash, the plane's location remained a mystery despite the 39-day search that has said to have been the largest in U.S. history. But yeah, Hale Boggs and Nick Begich.
Yeah, it's a fascinating podcast, the way the guy breaks it all down. And I think the reason that came to me is just because he is probably at a young enough age, and he's probably still coming out of the indoctrination part where he's just asking questions, right? So he's at that tipping point where he could probably communicate better to people who haven't quite made it over that hurdle yet. You know, they're still like going, I don't know. I mean, some things don't seem what they seem, but it's just easier to get along with everybody and go, yep, you know, do what you need to do. And let's all be a part of a happy society. And I get that thought completely. You know, you can find a home eventually as being the rogue bad guy out there telling conspiratorial stuff, but it's a little disconcerting initially. I remember, you know, when I first got in this and I was watching Loose Change and all this other stuff, and I really started getting to the point where I'm like, holy shit, this actually happened. And I'm like, and I remember my wife came home from work and hadn't showered in 3 days. I'm watching documentaries, I'm reading books, and she looks at me and I'm listening and explaining to her on the couch some of this stuff. And she just starts crying. And I'm like, honey, what's wrong? And she's like, I feel like you're turning into the Unabomber. You just sit around watching this stuff. And I'm like, oh no, honey, I'm fine. It isn't, you know, and I'm realizing, oh my God, not everybody's going to be ready for this right away. You know, you got to back off. You know, it's a lot of information to just throw at somebody, you know, they need to absorb it.
Any of this is, I mean, obviously this conversation is about the Kennedy assassination, but it's been this ripple effect. If you set up that bias, we're like, no, that could never happen in 63. You'll never get what's happening now because, I mean, we conspired here to make this show here tonight, you know, but going back to obviously the JFK, I think it's a huge benefit to everyone to kind of understand the historical perspective of what world he walked into, what apple carts he was upsetting. And I mean, it's been so crazy too. And I want to get both of your thoughts on that, how insane the level of, for lack of a better term, propaganda on not just how Oswald did it, but even in the conspiracy world, it was an ice bullet or a guy popped out of the freaking, out of the sewer and did it. I mean, all of this, and even the weaponization of the term conspiracy theorist started back then. What are your guys' thoughts on that propaganda thoughts on the propaganda?
I think it's
that we've seen over these many years.
I mean, I think it's effective, right? Because, you know, you saw the same thing in 9/11. Now, you know, the ICE weapon, for instance, was the House Committee on Assassinations. We're talking about later in the 70s. They're not just looking at JFK. They're looking at his brother RFK, and they're also looking at Martin Luther King Jr.'s death. In all of those cases, they said that it was probable that they were actually part of a conspiracy. I mean, they didn't make the case for who did it, but they basically said, it does look very plausible this is the case, and that we have been lied to, and information has been controlled. We probably should have some more independent investigations into this. And it was just around that time that you had the MK Ultra documents basically disappear. They started to come out. And, we'll get into it a little later, but, there's this McCone-Raleigh document that's been a lot around. I put it in Invisible Empire. It made its rounds early 2000s. I guess it had been around before then in rare instances. And I had seen it originally in like a local NBC article that I think Prison Planet or something had covered. Even had a small news piece with it. And, it had this documentation, the McCone-Raleigh document's about 2 pages long. And in it, it says that Oswald, because it is to the head of the CIA at the time. So it confirms basically that Oswald was trained by this agency, the CIA, in the Office of Naval Intelligence. Now, what I'm going to focus on later is how he was also an FBI informant, if you look at all the evidence and how that's kind of put into this as well. It also states basically that rogue members of that agency, the CIA, the Secret Service, and the FBI, because this is Rowley and the FBI at the time, were actually responsible for Kennedy's death. Now,
well, isn't that kind of the link between Guy Bannister, who was ONI at one point in time, and a la the movie JFK, once ONI, always ONI, who went into the FBI in that Camp Street area down there in New Orleans, where Oswald was handing out those leaflets?
Well, Office of Naval Intelligence has long been connected as a cover for Central Intelligence and Black Ops for a very long time. I mean, you go to 9/11 and Sander Hicks's work called The Big Wedding. And, there's somebody very connected to the Office of Naval Intelligence who had a list before 9/11 trying to give it to people where, World Trade Center, Pentagon, and the Capitol, they were all targets, amongst like 10 or 11 that day. It's very interesting stuff. But what else is interesting is that in this document, they also ponder whether or not when he came back from Russia, I believe the second time, they couldn't account for him for a certain number of days. And they even ask whether or not maybe some kind of MK Ultra technology was used on him. I mean, that's in the documents. I mean, you could check it out. I don't want to read it word for word. So anyway, I put it in my film. And later on, the Randy forums had tried to debunk it, but I'd heard, James Corbett didn't think it was a real document. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm going to study this thing. I want to see if I can back it up. I started looking up the number codes that were in the corner. I could not debunk it. And so I'm trying to go through every piece. And what I found really interesting was that there was something mentioned called the Bruyne Memorandum. And the Bruyne Memorandum is really the Bruyne Memorandum, but it's spelled Bruyne. Was like, what could this be? Because I searched the archives. I was looking for that. I was looking through, I believe at this time, the first dump, because that's when I got interested again from Trump. And I came across this guy, Warren C. DeBrew. So basically the Bruyne Memorandum is what tells the names or the people within these agencies that killed Kennedy, and McCone and Rowley had seen it and they don't want it to get out. It can never get out. So I'm like, is this even a real thing? Can I find out whether this is a real thing? Well, fuck yes, it's a real thing. So I find out about this guy named Warren C. DeBrew, who I guess we're going to put some stuff on the screen so everybody can check out this gentleman, who is a lifelong intelligence guy. First of all, let's take a look at the document. This is just the front page of it. Anybody can read this stuff. Those are just some of the highlighted areas. But let's see. Where is Warren here? There he is. Here's Warren. So, he was a New Orleans FBI figure in the JFK assassination. And the thing is, he was basically Oswald's handler. So he was in New Orleans, okay, in the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. Okay, basically he was following him. And Oswald, according to his name is, and we'll bring that document up as well. Man, I should know this by heart by now. I've done this already.
Is that the Alex J. Heidel?
No,
Alias?
not even close. Actually, it's Ernst or something like that. Pena. It's Ernst Pena. So let's go to him right here. So Pena was an FBI. I'm just gonna read it right off the thing. Was an FBI informant in New Orleans beginning in 1959 or 1960. He reported to Special Agent Warren C. DeBrew. So again, it's the DeBrew Memorandum that I was looking for that led me to this gentleman. For a number of years, the exact number he cannot remember. He spoke with DeBrew many times, provided information which he obtained with his connection to his position as a bar owner in New Orleans. He was never paid for his information. He was always threatened. So basically, he had shady shit going on in his bar in New Orleans, and he was edged out by Warren C. DeBrew because that's how they compromised people. Pena worked in some capacity for another United States government agency, which he refused to identify. Probably the Central Intelligence Agency. But basically, this guy ends up being an asset. As we know, organized crime works with these agencies and historical past. Okay, so let's continue. And I believe this was actually in the confirmation of that first dump. It had not been available. In regards to the allegation that Lee Harvey Oswald was an FBI informant, Pena saw Oswald at a restaurant on Decatur and Iberville streets in New Orleans in the company of other federal agents from Customs and Warren among them. Pena refused to say whether he observed Oswald and DeBrew speaking together, but he actually did say that on CBS. Okay, they actually referenced this, and I actually have that video. I've played it on my show a few times, and he gave his information to the Warren Commission. None of this was used. DeBrew followed Oswald over to Dallas. Why is that important? He's the guy that did the initial 800-page investigation into this that we've never seen. So he was at least handling it. I'm not saying he was in on it.
Have you heard any thoughts or any conversation about he was actually a CIA agent trying to infiltrate the FBI, especially for what they were trying to do down in Lake Pontchartrain with their prior to the Bay of Pigs?
I don't know. There's a difference. Infiltration. This
That's
guy
true,
was
yeah.
a lifelong intelligence asset. You want to know what he was doing before he was an FBI guy? He was hunting the Nazis in South and Central America that got away. And then he went back into Spookville after. DeBrew gets asked point blank about Pena's accusations, and he just says no. And so when he died, history said that he was not there. He was actually flown in to do this investigation. Okay, now I know that an 800-page document exists only because there's an FBI document, like one of these internal things that I was able to find on air, that said he did the overnight 800-page investigation analysis that we've never seen. And I think the final memorandum is what they're referencing. So I think if you want the keys to the names of the operatives that were actually, don't get me wrong, one of the things that led me down all these paths was what JFK 2, The Bush Connection, a great documentary.
Yeah.
Check out. But when you want to get hardcore, maybe that memo is wrong, but I doubt it. I think it has all the earmarks of what was really going on.
I mean, some of the early, no, I'm with that, man. And I've never heard those names before, and I'm gonna have to dip into that because my God, I've been so deep into it. But some of the people that they said that were initially a part of, that operation, you got your E. Howard Hunt, Frank Sturgis, supposedly Woody Harrelson's dad. What are your thoughts on any of these names, especially Howard Hunt, because he supposedly gave his deathbed confession laying out how he was like the head guy, kind of not the handler, but the head guy of the operation. What are your thoughts on any of those names and their role or not role in the assassination?
I think there's a possibility there. I think obviously you look at Jack Ruby and what happened with Oswald, and you have the mafia ties. You have the mafia ties that get Kennedy elected. And just like I stated, even Pena is not telling you of what other organization he worked for, and he's never getting paid, but he owns a bar in New Orleans. What do you think's going on there? Again, when we talk about, all these overlaps of what's going on in the 60s and 70s, think about MK Ultra. One of the things they never talk about MK Ultra, and the reality is out in the East Coast, Greenwich Village, out on the West Coast, while, this Haight-Ashbury thing is going on, they're running underage brothels and drugging people. Everybody thinks that they're just running like regular. No, they're running underage brothels, drugging people, and these guys are acting like out and out gangsters. I have this documentary I've done or not done. It was again one of these 70s investigations that I couldn't believe made it on TV. And I did like a 4-part series on it. And at one point, the guy that's running one of these side operations for MK Ultra, who's running one of these brothels, acting like a complete gangster. This guy's telling a story on camera where he met with him, and he was such a crazy guy that one time in a restaurant, the waiter said something, off color about like his order or whatever, and he put him on the ground and put a gun in his mouth in front of everybody. I mean, this is how people acted back then. And you're thinking, I'm looking at this
back
thing.
then.
I mean, yeah, back then. But again, it just shows you if a guy like that is part of a mind control program that's, this scientific thing, right? We're talking about a scientific elite takeover. We're talking about the emergence of a national security state, getting us further and further away from the Constitution and Bill of Rights. And I think a reading that might surprise everybody that I would say kind of bolsters this analysis of what happened to JFK and this emergence of an unaccountable elite slave state, national security system is Area 51 by Annie Jacobson. Because it's my belief, we're not looking at alien craft over there. No, we're building on technology that we're keeping from the public. Okay. Different propulsion systems. And that's where a lot of the human experimentation was going on. That's where they were doing a lot of the stuff that was underground and we never got exposed to. So when you read
that's interesting you brought that up, man, because I don't know how much you're paying attention to. Other people have paid attention to a gentleman by the name of Dark Journalist. He alludes to, I don't necessarily, whatever. He alludes to how so much this like deep state, what you're talking about, the other technology, some other technologies, and kind of somewhat obscuring the role, not necessarily the role, but the existence of these certain, these other technologies are also a part of this that we don't necessarily hear about, whether he's necessarily right or wrong. But the fact that you bring that up, I just have to say that because there's it seems to me as I go deeper into this, there is that role of potentially, I don't even say, alien. I hate to use that word. It just sounds so crazy, but other stuff going on that he was trying to keep a lid on, and he was responsible for keeping a lid on. That was a role in this as well.
Well, let me put it like this. I remember, Justin, when we were having our first conversation at the bar and it was talking rocket technology and how we're not going to the fucking moon and we're not going to fucking Mars. And that's a joke. They just announced this week we're not going to the fucking moon. That 2024, I mean, that's the headline because of COVID now and underfunding. It's COVID and underfunding, but that 2024 date, we can't do it. Again, it's a joke that rocket technology that we knew about in the 60s, the Saturn V, is it. No, everything went dark. And that's not the only thing that went dark. Again, understand your government for fun decided to dump cadmium sulfate on you from planes and then went into urban neighborhoods and rode around in fucking retrofitted station wagons and sprayed people there. And that's what we know about. Understand your government set up special courts for injections to indemnify any of these people criminally, no matter what happens to you. So again, it feels to me, we were talking about, have we ever lived in a constitutional republic? Have we ever had freedom? I think at some points, obviously right now I can go out into my backyard. I can do just about whatever I want. It's varying degrees of oppression.
Better have a mask on though. You're in Iowa.
What's up with the Iowa?
Better have a mask on. You're in Iowa.
You know what? Don't get me going on that shit because we're in
the
gates December 10th. We're doing it. I'm dead serious. You see what happens in the next couple days. I'm going fucking ballistic on this one because we got to do it. It's over, man. Like if I got to be the only one sit there, if I got to take a beanbag to the chest, if I got to get arrested, that's fine. If you just saw the governor of New Jersey just got bitched out with his family and said, fuck you literally said, fuck you to them. Good. Okay. At dinner while he's having a $300 fucking plus dinner when 8 million people in this country have been starved into poverty. Okay. And that's a low ball number. Okay. So fuck that guy. Okay. Fuck all these people. That's another thing. We have no idea how corrupt a lot of these people are on the inside until you get to it. We get to see sneak peeks. You know, every once in a while, we get to see some pictures at a weird Rothschild party that we're not invited to. Or every once in a while, we get to see some emails talking about some bizarre shit about kids in a fucking hot tub as fucking entertainment on a farm. We get to see glimpses of it, bro. The people on the inside that aren't a part of that, they don't fucking just see glimpses. They get a full view most of the time. They got a full view of what they're dealing with.
Yes, but we digress. We digress. Let us not lose our focus. So I'm with that because all of this has spiraled into what you're talking about. Juice, I mean, who didn't Kennedy piss off before in the 1960 election? I mean, he had everyone pissed off, from the apple cart he was upsetting from military intelligence once he got into office, basically based off of Sam Giancana's role in Chicago and Cook County, giving him those 100,000 votes, and then to have his brother become the attorney general and, you know, really, really fucking up what the mafia was doing, as well as trying to end the war in Vietnam. Whatever. Everyone has so many theories that the executive order, I forget what it is, as far as the Treasury issuing U.S. notes instead of Federal Reserve notes, him trying to inspect the Israeli nuclear facility in Duma. Like, who did he not piss off?
Yeah. And see, all those details in and of themselves are important, but sometimes you get lost in the details and people sit there and arguing, you know, was it Tower 7 or was it Tower 6? And which one was blown up? And which one was it, the Rays that gun that took it down? Or was it and at some point, you know, with the Kennedy situation, you just got to look. If you were approaching this like a prosecutor, you would lay down that first. Why? Why would this have occurred? And why would somebody have wanted to do it? This was like when I was down in Texas and I was at the actual site where this happened. Just happened upon John Grodin. He was down there, who was on the House Select Committee on Assassinations, and he's the one who basically said those pictures you have of Kennedy's the back of his head are not; those are fake. Somebody made those up. I've seen the real pictures, and those aren't them. And he brought another guy on who testified to that, and you know, obviously it all got covered up. Anyway, I talked to him extensively about it, and I'll talk about that later. But I thought to read this little passage from. He gave me a little magazine book when I was down there talking to him. And this just brief overview kind of hits all those main points, where John Fitzgerald Kennedy had made a lot of enemies in the 1,000 days of his presidency. He was at war with J. Edgar Hoover, the tyrannical and egocentric director of the FBI, several power factions within the CIA, the anti-Castro Cuban community because of the Bay of Pigs fiasco, many elements of the big business, notably steel and oil, the military for the stand on ending the Vietnam War, and his refusal to allow the second planned invasion of Cuba to be realized, and certainly not the least was organized crime, against which President and his brother, Attorney General Robert Kennedy, had declared formal war. The Kennedy brothers were fighting the only successful war against organized crime in American history. They were obtaining indictments, convictions, and deportations. The president's decision not to invade Cuba meant that the mob owned and run casinos that Castro had closed upon ascending to power would remain closed. Given the reality of the constant anti-Kennedy sentiment, one doesn't have to look too far to find the suspects in the murder. And when you start with that as the base and then start going down all these, I mean, how many people in power do you have to piss off before it's kind of a foregone conclusion, you know? It isn't so much any one of these people that is the actual person that he's to blame. That's what we're pointing to.
But that's almost what I was talking about as far as understanding the world that Kennedy inherited. The United States government, through its FBI or whatever CIA, was using organized crime going back to Lucky Luciano. So these alliances of Sammy Giancana, Santos Trafficani, Carlos Marcello, Johnny Riccelli, I mean, this is how they got a lot of work done. So, I mean, I don't know if we'll ever know, because obviously with the men who killed Kennedy, apparently they hired out like French assassins, etc. It almost doesn't even matter, because we could easily talk about, you know, what's the melting point of steel and who did this and that. It almost doesn't even matter how many shots came from where, et cetera, et cetera. The larger question is the why.
I think because somebody could say, okay, Bill Gates, he's the one. He's evil. He's the one we need to take down for
No.
this reason. Well, you know what? Bill Gates could step down as CEO of whatever he's running right now, and somebody else could take his place with the same ideology and the same whatever, and now he's the one we need to take down. So it's not the person. It's what they stand for and what they're pushing, right? So power has power moves and structures that those are the things we should always be focused on. What is their ideology and what do they stand for? And then you got to question, what do I stand for? What's my belief and, ideology? Because that's really what it comes down to.
Well, I mean, it's almost not even really what they stand for, even though they pretend to be, law and order, etc. The only reason Kennedy was there because he did some illegal shit. His father in the Kennedy Empire was brought upon from, transferring whiskey or Irish whiskey back in the day when the shit was illegal. So none of them, like going back to what Berman said, none of them are necessarily angels. Kennedy wasn't necessarily an angel. And even what we're going through with now, it's just like, again, Trump for me, and this is kind of a euphemism for all of this shit. Trump for me is like Michael Corleone at the end of Godfather 1 and the baptism scene. He's taking out old gangster to bring in new gangster. Now, none of that might even be true, but that's kind of what I'm talking about with Kennedy. He was trying to bring in some new gangster while these old gangsters were like, no, dude, go fuck yourself. Most notably, your Alan Dulles, your Richard Bissell, these guys who were so entrenched in global intelligence. I mean, going back to almost late World War I into World War II, these guys had shop set up. So that you got this new guy coming in with his dad who couldn't fucking ever become president. Roosevelt gave him the ambassadorship to Great Britain. They never really could make it happen. And you're going to upset this fucking apple cart? I mean, I know that sounds kind of silly and almost oversimplified, but dude, it's a macro of the block, if you will. Motherfuckers are trying to take over the block. When you start taking over cats able to make money on the block, you see what the fuck happens. And what we're seeing with the grand chessboard is just a macro version of that, in my humble opinion.
Yeah. I think, what was the movie you guys had brought up? It was a series on HBO, the chess or board empire or
Boardwalk Empire.
Boardwalk Empire. Yeah. So the way they personified Joe Kennedy in there was the way I think most presidents ideally are presenting themselves. They're intellectuals, but they know there's dirty shit going on and they play in the dirty shit fields. But when it comes in, it's like the old English British way of presenting yourself, drinking your tea before we decide to bomb and kill all of you, we will drink tea and decide on the battle plans, And Trump's more of a low level guy. It's like, oh my God, no, you don't say that to the people. No, you don't do that. Oh my God, what are you saying? It's like, drink your tea and present it in a fashionable manner, sir. I think that's really the difference.
All of them, even Kennedy. Everyone's kind of compromised by somebody. I was watching an interesting documentary this weekend in my hotel room before the shows this weekend on Ronald Reagan. The guy was a super leftist and he was an actor, but they realized, wow, dude, we could use that juice of you being an actor and everyone loving you for an actor. We're going to flip your script and make you a Republican. But that's what we're looking for in our politicians anymore, is almost like rock stars, TV stars, etc.
Well, let me say something about that though, Jeffrey. You're right. They were looking at him like the middle class. They again, where's he hanging out when he's the governor of California? He's hanging out at the fucking Bohemian Grove, where they literally refer to those type of people as their middle class. I got to go highlight that out of one of the books, but it's in the art book. I think it's like volume 7 or whatever. So they look at them as the middle class. Now, Ronald Reagan thought, hey, man, I ran fucking California. They really like me. I got some real power. They're going to push me for president. Now, they built maybe a little bit too much of a beast that they couldn't push a guy like Bush who ran against him. George H.W. ran against him. They were kind of arch enemies. Bush wasn't great on the campaign field. He was a politician nobody really liked on a national level. But at the end of the day, what happens? Reagan has to make that first concession. Well, I'm going to run with George Bush. David Rockefeller told me to. I've been taking a lot of rock. He's a good guy, that Rockefeller. I like that guy. We've had a good time. And then, Reagan keeps going. He goes, you know what? I don't like this Federal Reserve. I think that that's something that is broken. We're going to fix it. And all of a sudden, he's on the ground shot. Now, again, that's a different era than but really the beginning of our era in that early 80s, like, you could still get shot in the early 80s. We haven't seen that for a president in a long time.
I think that was the early on putting your hooks in that cult of personality. They cultivated Trump a little bit more, obviously more palatable. They didn't have to shoot him to get him in line, but
well,
that's
I don't think you can, Jeff. I think it's a
what's
different
that?
era. Because it's all right. Again, we see.
My point was, Reagan, they cultivated him from like the 50s, 60s, made him into this almost like useless idiot. And then they got their hooks in with your Cheneys. I mean, he just became deep state as just a figurehead. You know what I mean? And then similar to 41 or not 41, Bush W.
Listen, post getting shot, the guy's a fucking piece of Play-Doh. He's a puppet. He's knowing not to screw around or it's over. 100%. I believe that. You can't be that dumb. You know what I mean? I think that's what he was put in his place. God knows what was said to him. And I hate to be that Bill Hicks type conspiracy theorist when he was driven over to that hospital. I'm sure.
Have you heard the whole Hinckley brothers were having dinner with?
Not heard. I put it in my film. It's not like.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I apologize.
And here's the thing. You look at that and it just full circles what I'm trying to say to people. Can you imagine, number one, even then saying the guy that shot the president's going to be walking around in an upper class neighborhood with his affluent parents?
Colin Howard just said Hinckley had George H.W. Bush's number in his pocket as well. And I've heard that.
It's not, I mean, again, you know what? Let's do it live if we can. I'll show you.
Hey, bro, do what you got to do.
I was showing earlier a part of Invisible Empire where you can clearly see the Secret Service agents being called off of Kennedy. In fact, we could show that here, and this is just another.
I've seen that without a doubt.
That obviously the government was somewhat involved. Right there, the guy's throwing his hands up. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll go back. This is right before he rounds the corner, literally within 15 seconds of him being shot. And this is actually footage of this guy right here throwing his hands up. Oh, look at that.
I thought that was when they were just coming in from Fort Worth. Kennedy had landed, and that was the procession lead.
Plaza. No.
Well, I just don't see any other buildings around there. You might be right. I always thought that was like how they were leading out of the procession coming to Dallas and Love Field coming from Fort Worth.
I do not believe so, sir. Maybe I could be corrected on that one, but let's bring it to again. I have that large section on Bush. Here he is.
Yeah, right? Either way, that's messed up when you have Secret Service who was supposed to be at the end of the car, the rear of the car being called off, whether it was right at Dealey Plaza or coming from the airport. That was concerning. And that's obviously that Secret Service guy expressed that. Like, what the fuck, dude? Really? You're pulling me off?
Yes. So after he gets shot, that's Reagan. Okay, we'll play it. This is Reagan getting shot. And
astoundingly, Bush would again be connected.
So just who is John Hinckley Jr.?
When he left this neighborhood 8 years ago, he was, by all accounts, well-liked and seemingly normal.
This donut shop near the motel was visited by Hinckley, who reportedly waited for a phone call here each day, even though he had a phone in his motel room. The nature of the calls is not known. A touch of irony. The young man walking with the elder Hinckley is 30-year-old Scott Hinckley, John Jr.'s brother. He and Vice President Bush's son, Neil, are friends. They had planned to have dinner together in Denver tonight.
Tonight, the night after the guy gets shot, Bush's kid is supposed to be having dinner with the brother of the person that shot the president. Okay,
that's crazy.
On top of that, Hinckley
Plans have been canceled.
Yeah,
we were
that's
told
crazy.
A madman acting alone. If that was the case, why was he making phone calls from a payphone down the road instead of his hotel room? Why was the would-be assassin's brother a family friend of the man who stood to gain the president?
Yeah, come on, dude. Come on. Ain't nothing changed, dude. Nothing is new under the sun, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm just saying, and you look at Bush and his family, and, I talked about, pre-CIA and the rise of the military-industrial complex and even Skull and Bones and him being a social climber and how you can climb. Listen, man, Prescott Bush, George H.W. Bush especially, they are, to me, some of the biggest players behind the scenes in the history that we're never going to be taught unless somehow we take back a constitutional republic, unless somehow we become the great resistance, because it's already too damn long that we haven't been able to out the deep state. Again, Trump, what are you waiting for, bruh? What are you waiting for? Are you waiting until January 19th to give me the JFK documents?
Yeah. Well, that he already had that opportunity. Whatever he set up. Yeah.
Twice.
That
But
was
again,
nothing.
how do you fight the deep state for real if you can't fight the deep state from 57 years ago, Jeff? That's what I'm trying to say here. And again, we're now in a different era where I think that they're now using the tools of technology and manipulation and been able to do so successfully, where they're not going to shoot somebody in broad daylight.
That's their way anymore. And that's it's more almost like what we're seeing now with warfare. It's more asymmetric than symmetric. It's just bad PR to be putting bullets in people's head. But you could easily create a PR campaign to demonize and essentially politically or personally assassinate somebody. And anymore, that's what it is. You can just have an assertion that it becomes gospel as opposed to any kind of due process or really teasing out whether you're fucking innocent or not. I mean, when we get into the why again, guys, I mean, we've seen, I would love to say this was the beginning of, I'm a history guy. So when I saw this, I happened to be, I don't know if I talked to you about it, Burmis. HBO was a show called Rome.
I loved Rome.
It was amazing. And I'm a history guy and I love reading about this kind of, even in Jim Garrison, all it takes is one Judas bill is what he said, just people and Judases and people who are just, politics is power. Like the guy Donald Sutherland played Fletcher Prouty. Politics is power, nothing more. Kings are killed. This is not new, and we're probably going to see much more of it. But this was more of a modern day assassination with the media right behind it. For me, this was, again, like I said, it made me as a kid, man, just question everything. So a few years later, when I saw this in Reasonable Doubt, like I said, in 88, 89, we started popping off the Persian Gulf War and all this other stuff. I was so inquisitive and I was so questioning everything. And that's just spun into everything I do. What's the ramifications of understanding? I know you guys kind of got into it more with 9/11, and I had already kind of sniffed this like a fart in the car well before 9/11. But what has this done for your overall worldview on how you assess the world? Obviously, none of us trust mainstream media, but as far as questioning the reality that they present to us, what are your thoughts on how this event helped process events in the world today?
I mean, this has moved to a philosophical discussion to me because it really comes down to this. I really don't. It's easy to try to find the bad guys and the good guys. And then it's just almost like what you were saying, Burmis, that there aren't necessarily just bad guys and good guys, right? It's the philosophical idea that absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? And it doesn't matter who the players are. Listen, with our whole cage digression and we're building this and it's getting to this level and say we're making $50 million and oh my God, now we're all buddies, right? But now Burmis is going to make a move and he's going to take us down. He's going to now we got to defend ourselves by, listen, power inherently corrupts because you stand to lose so much the higher up you get, the farther you have to fall. So people just start getting diabolical in their nature, man. And I think that is the problem. When we're all just making, enough to get by, whatever, we can all just, adopt certain cultural norms, get along, know the difference between right and wrong. But when you have so much to lose and so much is at stake, and that all it takes is one block to be pulled in the Jenga cube here, and some of my family can start getting taken out, man, or maybe some of my players and people supporting me. And now you start going, okay, well, I got to defend myself. What are we going to do to stop this power surge? Because they're coming for us, And that's what's happening at Trump levels and all around there, right now is
the global level of global politics, man, the grand chessboard. You're absolutely right. The stakes are so high. Normal people who probably wouldn't do certain shit to protect their fiefdom historically have done some fucking foul shit. Burmis?
I mean, when it comes down to it, and he was right when, philosophical discussion, when you get to JFK, when you get to the level I'm at of just trying to analyze all these, whether you want to call them deep events, mysteries, historical cover-ups, inaccuracies, nature of reality, I've just come to the realization at the end of the day that I am a 41-year-old man. I barely know what the fuck happened in those 41 years. I have a perception of what happened around me. I have a historical perception of reality. I can only do so much to fill my brain with accepted facts that I'm not a part of and I wasn't around for, period. But what I have come to understand most is that two things absolutely exist when you come down to every conversation. It's not necessarily black and white because there are plenty of gray areas, but inherent goodness and selflessness and love I have seen, and unacceptable hatred and malice and evil I have seen. They exist. They are forces of nature that we, in my opinion, do not fully understand. And if there is anything I try to do in my life, it is to try to be a part of that positive force and not fall to those demons, whether they be real or philosophical. Because I'm telling you right now, there are people out there that have had a silver spoon, that had good parents. They paid attention to them. They're killers. They're rapists. They've done sick shit. They're fucking inherently evil. You know, they'll lie to you about it. They'll be a sociopath about it. They'll be Ted fucking Bundy. You know what I'm saying? That's a real thing. And there are also people that have been kicked on and spit on and literally fucking raped and bent over and will give you the shirt off their back and help you in life. Okay. So, you know, I don't believe there's some kind of person out there that is, you know, never done a bad thing or anything like that. But there are varying degrees. And I'll tell you, man, I've met some people. I'm just like, is this person even real? He's so good. And I know that we've all met that person is like, who the fuck is this cocksucker? Like, who the are you? Is it a cartoon character? I mean, like when you look at Klaus Schwab, do you not just fucking, does it not reek Bond villain? So, you know, that
it sort of makes you, and I say this completely jokingly, ladies and gentlemen, this is helps you, makes you start to understand what the fucking eugenicists are talking about. But yeah. I get you though. I mean, that's something we all have to create that balance with. We have to understand you cannot have the yin without the yang. It's our responsibility though, especially, you know, Burmese, you know, it's myself I was talking about today with the nature of the kind of the shows we do. It's great for you to have like MMA Mindset or us for Everything Combat to balance it out, just because it's incumbent on all of us, whether you have a fucking show or not, just individually throughout your life. We're living in some, in my opinion, some fairly dark times, but you know, glass half, you know, full, half empty. But it's our job to stay in the light while understanding darkness is kind of roaming right now.
Look, man, like I said, I don't believe in utopia. Right. So even in the worst dystopia, I still think that you're not going to be able to squash out goodness, that there will be some kind of resistance, that there will, you know, to the very end, you know, that's just the way of the world. And, you know, whether it's the 21 grams phenomenon of what some people call a soul or whatever it is, you know, and I hate to go all Joe Rogan on people, but those that have taken some kind of psychedelics and maybe, you know, left that world for a second where you're like, whoa, this feels real, but it's not obviously what's going on here. And you start questioning yourself maybe in ways that you hadn't. And I'm not, you know, recommending people do that. You start to realize, I mean, there are other experiences in life that there is some kind of energy. I'm not telling you heaven or hell. I'm not telling you it's not there. Again, I wasn't around 4,000 years ago. I wasn't around 4 million years ago. I don't fucking know. I know I've been lied to a lot. Okay,
but there are writings from people who have been around that long, you know, ancient cuneiform, Sumerian kings, etc., who have illuminated to the fact that there's some other shit going on.
You guys have heard the idea, what is it, the book? It's like the Middle Eastern Indian book of whatever, that if you open up your, like, you could connect to that vibe, you can know all information and all knowledge, right? Meaning like Bill Hicks. How did Bill Hicks know what he knew? Where did that come from? Did he read books upon it? Or did he just do acid and some drugs and open himself up to the universe?
Doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. I think he might have done a little bit of the both. He might have been an old soul that was like, oh, let me get some of this. You know, like William Blake said, when the doors of perceptions are cleansed, things will appear as they truly are, infinite. I know that, yeah. I mean, you got them old souls out there, man. I mean, you know, well, yeah, it's a whole other conversation. But yeah.
I think it always comes back to the philosophical part to me, because I don't think any one person is inherently evil. I think evil can exist within any one person if you start going down this pathway. Anybody I've known that's moved in positions of power. Oh, here's an example. When we were doing the Spielberg show, and he attached to this, and he backed us to go to produce this show with Yahoo Originals as the platform which we were doing it, So now we have Spielberg kind of in our corner as the executive producer of this show we were doing at the time called Rising. We were trying to get off the ground. And we have the other power structure, the Yahoo guys, which is a funny way of saying it, but it was literally Yahoo.com had something called Yahoo Originals. They were trying to battle against Google, and they were trying to put out some original content, almost what Netflix became, right? And so this show was called Rising, and we were supposed to put it out. And Spielberg loved our show content that we had done. I want these guys to do it. So here we are doing it. And at the same time, we have Yahoo guys, they're the production managers, whatever, that felt like, no, this is our project, though. So they're fighting and trying to make us look bad. And the whole time we're playing politics, where Chad's trying to play chess moves to take this guy out because he's causing a problem with our budget. While that happens in any organizations, even from the managerial and, presidents, CEOs, whatever level, right? Now there's a whole level of board of directors, which are the old souls that still have vested interest in companies and stuff. And they're making different chess moves. And anybody that's been at any one of those levels, even if you're still got a good heart and you're trying to do the right thing, you're smart enough to know not to get caught in the wrong move. And the other guys that are making moves that you're either going against or you're working with you, all are looking at you. And there's like a secret handshake type thing, like going, you know what I know? I love you, bro, but I don't trust you. And it's like, no offense, just the world we live in and work in right now. And it's because you have to be on guard, even if you like these people, because the wrong move will put you in a position of less power, which could get you canned, or maybe something which you would consider to be the wrong thing would happen, right? So that's what you get caught in. That's what people start off, and then that just keeps evolving to the point where those people don't even know who they are anymore, because they're so trapped in protecting the power that they've got to try to keep their families, their friends, their employees, their staff that works underneath them engaged in the right, circles of power, that they're willing now to make moves that would otherwise, from other people at the bottom, would say, well, that's fucking evil. And they go, yeah, but you don't know what I know. And that's the thing you get caught in. And I think any one person, the farther up the ladder you're willing to go, will start seeing that world. It's just really easy to be a good guy if you just stay down close to the bottom. Because what do you got to lose, Going, dude, I keep it real. It's like a drummer that used to be a part of this band. All these guys are screwing around with their girlfriends all the time. And this one dude, Dave, East Coast Dave, man, he was go, dude, fuck these motherfuckers. Dude, I keep it real, man. I wouldn't fuck around with my woman like that. And it's like going, Dave, you're 380 pounds with a huge honking nose, and you don't have choices, dog. It isn't like you're just
easy
a
to say
really
that,
good
yeah.
guy. Yeah. Try being Tiger Woods, man, where you got the Swedish bikini
Oh my
team
god,
coming at you,
Tiger Woods, y'all.
Yeah.
Well, I agree in the sense that I think that nurture is a lot stronger than quote unquote nature. But dude, I just think there are those anomalies out there, man. You look at, I'm a microevolution guy. I'm not a macroevolution guy. Like, that's one thing that, I feel like human beings are special. But at the same time, we do have a lot of those animalistic instincts built into our reptilian brain and otherwise, right? And I'm just saying, man, there are forces in nature. It probably goes beyond humanity. It interconnects us throughout the entire, whether it just be our Earth or the universe, or whether they want to sell you on a multiverse or a fucking simulation, whatever it is, there is some kind of interconnection. There is something, I know that you and I have discussed it, Justin, to these quantum mechanics and what's going on with these machines. What exactly it is, I'm not sure yet. And but I do know it's technology that exists. And to me, again, man, at the end of the day, I think that we're not here forever. Whatever this, iteration of us are. I have no guarantees one way or the other than I'm going to try to influence this realm of reality in a positive manner, put out as much truth as possible, teach my kids the same way, and push forward to goals that other people don't think are possible. Because it's only having those visions that, the most successful people that you ever learn about, forget about the ones that are truly successful, the people that have a happy home and family and have left an actual legacy for their kids that isn't just money, mansions, and cars and power, but an outset like the one I'm talking to. So I think that's the key. And again, I'm not a fucking hokey guru, but I've seen enough where, again, when I'm sitting there kicking and screaming, and I'll never forget, when we're doing this 2006 conference in LA, and the porn conference is right above because the CES is going on. And, I remember it was Carmen Valentina, I think it was her name. She was there, and I ended up in an elevator with Jenna Jameson's ex-husband. I knew exactly who he was, and
Tito?
What's up?
Tito Ortiz?
Oh, before Tito, porn industry. So I'd seen him bang her, and so I knew who he was as soon as I saw him, and he was talking shit to me in an elevator. Ron Jeremy, but one of the guys I talked to, was I guess I'll drop his name. I don't care. Tommy Pilata. I guess he wouldn't mind now telling me this, me telling this story, but I'm sitting there. It's right around the time of Superman's coming out with Kevin Spacey by Bryan Singer. It ends up being a big flop, but we all know about Bryan Singer and Kevin Spacey now.
Of course.
And he was there because, he'd just done A Scanner Darkly with Alex, and, he'd just been around. And at one point he looks at me and he goes, "Why do you do this, man?" And I turned to him and I looked at him and I go, "Man, on top of everything else that's really fucked up about the situation, when you really dig deep, you find out all these people that act like, Christian conservatives or whatever, and the high moral authority, not only are they not that, but a bunch of them are into weird occult shit and they're fucking kids." And I go, I don't know about you, but that's just unacceptable to me. And I know that's wrong. And I think that I'm going to fight that. And he goes, "Oh, okay. Yeah, well, okay." And I look at him, I go, "Dude, you're in Hollywood. You just produced a, big movie. I mean, I would imagine that you've been around some fucked up shit. I'm sure you know a pedophile that never gets talked about." And he looks at me, he goes, "Well, yep." and I didn't say anything until it went public ever. But he tells me, and we're talking, and he goes, "Well, I'm at this party," and he's like, you go to some of these parties and they've got blow laid out, and sometimes it's just like regular hookers and they've got them around, and you know what they are, and it's not a big deal, and it's varying degrees of insanity. He goes, "But I'll never forget."
Varying degrees
of insanity. He goes, "I'll never forget being at a party at Bryan Singer's, and Bryan Singer had what appeared to be a 14-year-old topless boy on a dog leash the entire party, dragging him around." I was like, "Okay, all right, well, I can't watch The Usual Suspects anymore, thanks, but I want to know that." Again, I don't want to not know that. Okay. And so from that, not only is there confirmation of that, but later on an open secret gets made where you just find out way more horrific things, not only about Bryan Singer, but later we find out about Kevin Spacey, who he's worked closely with on many projects. So it's only more information.
Who's two accusers, I think 2 of the 3 have wound up dead.
Who? Oh, we're
Kevin
talking
Spacey's.
There's more than 3 accusers on varying levels with Kevin Spacey. But
more than one has wound up dead, though, since they've made those accusations.
Yes, I agree. Yes. It's wacky. And that's the other thing, while we're talking about politics and how things really work and how not everybody, it's not good versus evil, but there's varying degree of scumbag. I think that's one of the reasons that Game of Thrones was so good, because everybody sucks and everybody's vying for power, and everybody at one point's willing to make that scumbag decision and not be the good guy, right?
And almost going to back what Juice was saying, this is almost human nature. Politics is power. This has been happening since ancient Sumeria. This is nothing new. It's just a new iteration. And now with the powerful thing of the internet and media, it's literally, they're able to now mass MK Ultra the fucking world. They can create narratives now that, you know, it's literally the Matrix. I always say the Matrix wasn't a movie, it was a documentary. They can invert fucking reality, and as we've seen over and over again, to affect millions and millions of people.
Again, man, I agree with that assessment. Unfortunately, it's more than millions. I'd say that
over like I said, going back to ancient Sumeria, absolutely. I mean,
even millions now. We're right. I mean, listen again.
Yes.
You and I, we're doing interpretations. We're reading documents. We're watching video footage. We're doing the investigations we can. Right. I mean, when we get back to fucking organized religion, I try not even to go there, other than like the anecdotal, you know, shit that I've read and watched and I think's interesting and stuff like that. And obviously, I've watched all the conspiracy videos and the prophecies. But I've always been smart about it, where I'm not only taking it with a grain of salt, but I'll never forget when I was making Invisible Empire, where we just saw a clip of it with John Hinckley, the guy that was doing the graphics at the time. He was big on the 2012 thing. We released that in May of 2010. And I go, brother, let me tell you something. 2012 is going to come and it's going to pass. We're going to be fine. and I go, dude, that's hype. That's nonsense. I'll never forget. I could have easily gone the route. So later on in the Jesse Ventura special, I was on the phone with True TV and they were trying to get me to come on. And all these people, like, I got a lot of offers after it was InfoWars. I got an offer for that and like some kind of Great Tomorrow show where they were going to try to prove that the pyramids were energy sources. Everything that was tried to give to me was stuff that I wasn't really interested in, and was going into that paranormal realm where I wasn't not saying that there wasn't something there, but I'm not going to say, this is it. I'm David Wilcock. Everything's real. You know?
The blue chicken people. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, I wonder about that sometimes, but the bottom line is you put this stuff out into the ether because, again, I think it bears more resemblance to the truth, but you always got to have the humility to say, all right, I fucked up on that one. I'm wrong on that one.
Without a doubt. I mean, people do have to definitely take their ego out of their, you know, geopolitical analysis, especially the geopolitical, but even, you know, what we're talking about, you know, old school stuff, ancient stuff. I mean, we can definitely learn from, you know, things if we not necessarily set up our confirmation bias. We're like, no, that's completely impossible. We just got to be able to exchange ideas civilly like we are here tonight, and, you know, be able to make our most accurate assessment based off of, you know, whatever, like you said, legitimate information. But again, going back, we somewhat diverted.
Isn't it amazing how much JFK just gets you talking about just any subject?
And seeing that's what, and literally for me, I started on this shit, and that was my tumble down the rabbit hole, because it just goes into all these other things and names and companies and just ideologies and paradigms that just, this was the beginning of, like, again, we knew kings are killed, politics are power. This has been going on forever. But in our modern era, November 22nd, 1963, with television just kicking in and all of that entailed, it just changed the way we see the world. It changed the way the world operates. We, you know, granted, we don't have our Walter Cronkites anymore, but we rely so much on our media. And for me, and I literally mean this, dude, I know there's some decent media out there, but the media as we know it, even since back then, Walter Cronkite, the fucking guy, and all of his little ancillary players, or all the media's ancillary players, created a narrative that still exists today. And think of all the wars, WMDs, the Persian Gulf War, the 9/11, etc., that has been fed to us as complete horseshit. But and the Kennedy assassination for me was like the beginning of that, how they can feed you fucking sewer rat and tell you it's pumpkin pie, and we ask for seconds, to the point where today, even today, 2020, people still believe it was fucking Lee Harvey Oswald with this shitty Italian rifle.
Yeah, I think it's almost a red herring to say that the media, because it really comes down to when you have too much centralized control of any one media channel, when you have one company that's able to own all these networks, and it takes away from the concept of critical thought. I mean, if all of us could just have an awakening, whether it be a 9/11, a JFK, whatever, where you break through this understanding that you're not being told the truth, not because people are trying to do some mind control thing. I mean, they are, but it's more so to try to get you to just line up on the side that's going to benefit their interests, right? So I think once you break through that, you now start reading details a little closer and in a different light, right? It's just what aggravates me so much about the JFK thing is that somebody can look at somebody's head getting shot and blown back and say, no, they were shot from the back of the head. And I'm going to go, I used to blow the shit out of stuff on a farm. That's all we did was shoot stuff. Okay. I've seen 1,000 things get hit with a bullet, man. I can tell you, I've never once in my life ever shot something from this side and then it flew at me after I shot it. You know, I mean, it just, that's not the way physics or just, you know, the nature of things work. So I'm amazed that human beings could have such trust in any institution, whether it be a government, their priest at their church, whatever their trust is. And I'm like going, you're willing to disprove your own critical thought and throw it aside and accept what you're being told because everybody else is going, yeah.
Well, and even in your lying eyes, like I said, I don't know if I said this already in the beginning of the show. I interviewed Dr. Sarah Weck, the forensic pathologist who was on the House Select Committee of Assassinations board, and he tore to shit the single bullet theory. You know, the single bullet theory and the single bullet, which is still, you could see it today, supposedly created like, what is it, 6 or 7 fucking wounds, and it came out absolutely pristine. And his thing was, you shoot this motherfucking bullet in one bone and it's going to come out deformed. This thing supposedly did 6 or 7. Again, that goes to the whole feeding you sewer rat and telling you it's pumpkin pie. They invert reality so to the point where even ballistic experts are like, that's impossible. But when you have that media to piggyback on top of that and create that false fucking narrative, none of it matters. And this gentleman is even still speaking today. Dr. Sarah Weck, I just posted my interview with him on my Facebook page, our Rofkin page, that podcast network. It was just mind blowing because, I mean, he's taking to his death. He'd be like, I don't give a fuck what evidence you have. This is my perennial piece right here. The single bullet theory. This goes against any kind of physics or ballistic that we've ever heard. But yet here we are, many people still doubling down on the fact that Lee Harvey Oswald did this fucking deed in November 22nd, 1963. Gentlemen, we got to wrap it up. Closing statements on either of you guys. I don't give a fuck how long it takes. What are we looking at? What did this event mean, and how has it affected the world we're in today?
Obviously, it's affected in many ways. I think it's a testament to the fact that, you know, propaganda, fake news, whatever you want to call it, is not a new phenomenon. Tyrannical governments or controls or lies made by the United States or the military-industrial complex, again, are nothing new. It's something that's been persistent. And I think historically, if we want to start taking our country back, we have to acknowledge this. And we have to work to somehow, again, not only get the truth out about this, but restrict the mechanisms of power the way our founders wanted them to be restricted, with a judicial, an executive, and a legislative branch, in that they can be criminally prosecuted and actually held accountable and not be part of some national security state where if there's a big boo-boo outside of what we say is okay, we'll just cover it up, or, you know, not only would cover it up, we'll carry it out, because listen, man, we know how dark everything is right now. The Great Resistance, you know, should have started a long time ago, long before the lockdown stuff. And it's a damn shame that I believe those that committed this act absolutely 100% got away with it.
Yeah, I would end it with Grodin handed me this, and at the very end, he has a call to action. It should anger us all terribly that after more than 3 decades, we still don't know the truth. And the arrogance of those in power who continue to lie and continue to cover up is beyond tolerance. It may be too late for justice in this case, but it's never too late for the truth. And then he ends it with this quote from Kennedy: "Let us go forth to lead the land we love, asking his blessing, his help, but knowing that here on earth, God's work must truly be our own." I just think,
well, and I will, yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I think whether anybody believes any of these people are scot-free of error or not, obviously is not true, but I think it's the intention, right? It's never the human being. It's the words they might have slipped upon, even the most horrible human being, that it's the trueness of the words that people should focus on, because you're always going to find fallibility. I mean, look at look at the arrogance that all of those people in power thought of Kennedy. Here's a guy coming down, taking down power structures left and right while banging Marilyn Monroe in front of us and his wife.
Mr. President.
Who does this guy think he is? That's what they were thinking.
Yeah, no, without a shadow of a doubt. And I really want to thank you guys for coming on. I mean, I may even do another one here in these next couple of days. As this event being the impetus of even why I'm doing a potential show like this, and Conspiracy Farm was because of this moment right here as a young kid having my mind completely fucked about, they blew us, like, literally. He was our president was publicly fucking executed in broad daylight, driving through a major city in this country, sitting next to his wife. I'm not going to get into Black Lives Matter, Who Lives Matter. None of our fucking lives matter when you can have the whitest of white men of a most aristocratic family in the fucking world have his head blown off in broad fucking daylight. None of our lives matter, man. But at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, to go back to quoting Mr. John F. Kennedy, we all inhabit this small planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's futures, and we are all mortal. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us this evening. Thank you, Mr. Burmis. Thank you, fucking Juice. I love you, brother. Thank you for both of you guys. We had a great weekend watching fights. That's how cool we are. We can flip the script so quickly and talk about fights, but then talk about some of the most craziest moments in the history of our world. Again, peace and so much love, you guys. We're in crazy times, man. Just take a deep fucking breath and we'll make it through it, man. We most definitely will. Jason, thank you for all you do, dude. Juice, thank you for helping out with all you do, my friend.
Yeah.
And hopefully everybody has a great night.
All right, later. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.